Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to contribute to this motion by the Minister for Finance to borrow $10.7 million from the Caribbean Development Bank's Special Fund Resources SFR to meet the ordinary capital resources debt service obligations to the Caribbean Development Bank for a period commencing 1st day of October 2020 and terminating on the 30th day of September 2021. In order to preserve fiscal space and to be used to A, finance immediate essential emergency COVID-19 pandemic-related health expenditure, and B, bolster economic and social recovery. So I assume, Mr. Speaker, that either on the finance immediate essential emergency COVID-19 pandemic-related health expenditure, or on the B, bolster economic and social recovery, that I am allowed the latitude to speak about socio-political matters. Because on the B, bolster economic and social recovery clearly speaks to the government's actions and how they impact the constituents of Beaufort North in the socio-political manner. But Mr. Speaker, I wish for you to allow me to digress 1 minute just to make a brief statement about a very important issue in my constituency. Mr. Speaker, something happened in my constituency over the weekend at the Peru Catholic Church, and I am very saddened as a member of Parliament for Beaufort North by the attack which was captured on film, where a young man allegedly attacked a statue with an incendiary device and proceeded to threaten worshippers at the Peru Catholic Church, so much so entering the church, reaching the altar, and threatening the parishioners of the Peru Catholic Church. Mr. Speaker, this was a very sad situation, and as parliamentary representative, I condemn in the strongest possible terms this action. Mr. Speaker, this is my church, and although I visit all of the denominations in Beaufort North, the Peru Church is where I visit more often than other places because I live at Peru. My home, Mr. Speaker, is just a few houses from the Catholic Church in Peru. And although I was not in church that morning, I was very sad to have seen this. I want, Mr. Speaker, as parliamentary representative, to thank all those who acted very quickly, Mr. Speaker, to effect a citizen's arrest. And you saw, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Oliver, a comrade of mine, and his son, Mr. Sole, and others from Peru acted swiftly. And what is interesting, Mr. Speaker, they prevented a possible escalation of that situation. And you saw how they brought this man down to a situation of calm. And they held his hands and brought him to the police. I also wish to applaud the policeman who's from Peru, Mr. Speaker, who took action and called in officers who were in the area. I want to say we are citizens of this peaceful and conscious constituency of Beaufort North will not tolerate anyone attacking or disrespecting any of the places of worship. We have several in Beaufort North, and we condemn these actions. I also call, Mr. Speaker, on all of our professionals, our counselors, our community leaders, to continue to help our youth, because while I condemn these attacks in the strongest possible manner, we must also find a way through the professionals, the counselors, the youth leaders, the football leaders, and all of us in the community must find a way to find out and to observe when our youth are troubled so that we can continue to seek help for them, Mr. Speaker. I know this young man's mother, and I know she's a strong Catholic. She's always in church, and there's no way his family will ever condone this kind of behavior. It's very sad, Mr. Speaker, And I wish as parliamentary rep to state that we condemn it and we ask everyone in the community to continue to help our youth and continue to protect our places of worship. So thank you, Mr. Speaker. There were some other unsavory incidents. I wish not to grace the Parliament with the nasty vagaries of what else we saw. We will speak about it at another place. But Mr. Speaker, no, we are not speaking in Parliament, not at all. Well, Mr. Speaker, going back to the motion, this motion, Mr. Speaker, is to finance immediate and essential emergency COVID-19 pandemic-related health expenditure, and I repeat, to bolster economic and social recovery. Mr. Speaker, every time we speak about COVID-19 and the impacts of COVID-19 in this Parliament, I ask this question, and my colleagues have also asked this question. Can the government of St. Lucia give the Parliament and the people of St. Lucia a report on the expenditure related to COVID-19 to date, to the COVID-19 response to date? The government has been silent on this matter. We are here once again, Mr. Speaker, to borrow $10.7 million from the CDB. This amounts to 28.836 million EC dollars. Kosa, Mr. Speaker, nous avons gouvernement qui prend en dette, en loan, qui presque 29 millions de dollars en l'argent ici, l'argent nous a servi cette ici. That is on top of the $77 million from the IMF, plus other funds, Mr. Speaker, which this government has secured or has access to. What I'm saying simply is this. If every time we come to the Parliament to borrow money for expenditure on the COVID-19 response, isn't it a responsible action for the government to give us an update, Mr. Speaker, on what has happened so far? When we came to extend the state of emergency, I asked the same question, Mr. Speaker. How much has the government spent on relief efforts so far? How much has the government spent on the alterations to the Iwanora International Airport and to VG and to the ports and so on? What are the contracts worth? The government, Mr. Speaker, is not providing any answers where that is concerned. This morning I heard ministers made statements by ministers, and no minister made any statement about these matters. As a member of Parliament for Vieux North, Mr. Speaker, I continue to ask the government to give us an account of the expenditure related to COVID-19, to the COVID-19 response. Gouvernement pas qu'à dire nous combien l'argent est dépensé, en laisse différents sujets qui a fait, il dit pour aider les gens pour combattre COVID-19. Gouvernement quand est venu dit, oh, il a fait un bon travail avec COVID-19, mais personne ne savent quantité l'argent que le gouvernement a dépensé. Et ça, c'est un bagage qui a trois cassé moi, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have asked this over and over and over again. And in this regard, let us go back to A. The motion indicates that this is to finance immediate essential emergency COVID-19 pandemic-related health expenditure. What exactly does this mean? The Prime Minister, as usual, expects this Parliament to just take his word for it. So he comes to the Parliament again and simply says they need to expend money to work on the impacts of COVID-19, but in the motion, there is no explanation. What exactly are we going to spend the money on? Pandemic health-related expenditure. What does that mean? What does this mean? Can the Prime Minister itemize how much money are we going to spend on PPEs, protective equipment? What does it mean? Does it mean another booth at Iwanora International Airport? There are constituents from Vieux North who work at the Iwanora International Airport. Many of them from Pierrot and from Grace. some of them from Bellevue, some of them from Kako and Savan. I want to be able to tell them that the Prime Minister said he will spend $4 million to ensure that they are safe since the government has reopened the airports and so on. Is it unreasonable, Mr. Speaker, as a member of Parliament, to ask the government, the Prime Minister, to tell us these things? Is it unreasonable? Est-ce que je peux demander trois questions? Je peux demander au gouvernement, qui ça il a fait avec tout l'argent ça là? Presque 29 millions de dollars. Comme ça, le gouvernement ça a payé l'argent, Mr. Speaker. When they go around and tell people they don't have money, COVID-19 is a problem, gouvernement paye l'argent. Avec yo pas qu'à dire nous ça yo qu'a fait avec tout millions de dollars ça là. I'm asking the Prime Minister to tell us what this money is going to do. Mr. Speaker, I spoke about the workers at the airport from Vieux North. I spoke about safety and safety gear. I know a young lady from Vieux North called Glory, and every day we speak about how the work areas at the airport should be secured. And she's always worried about her family. Are we guaranteed that with this $29 million, people like her will be safe as we open our borders? Mr. Speaker, I heard the Prime Minister said that the government of St. Lucia applied to the CDB because of their concern and all kinds of things like that. If you go to the CDB website, Mr. Speaker, today, as we speak, use your phone, your computers, and people who are listening at home and watching can go to their phones right now, and you can just type CDB COVID-19 response, and you will see this article. And on May 18th, 2020, there was an article by the CDB. And the CDB has indicated in this article that they are making emergency loans to 7 Caribbean countries: Antigua and Barbuda, 13 million, Belize, 15 million, Dominica, 2.5 million, Grenada, 5.9, St. Lucia, 10.8, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, 11.3, Suriname, 8.2, US. Am I to assume that this is the same facility that we are talking about here today? So it is a Caribbean-wide facility by the CDB. And St. Lucia will access $28.836 million EC. So it is very clear, Mr. Speaker, that this government has received or will receive monies to help people. And listen to what the CDB has indicated. And this is from the same article by the CDB. And I quote, Mr. Speaker, from the CDB, the provision of support to the 7 countries to respond to COVID-19 and keep critical government services and operations running is urgent to halt the economic decline and minimize social hardship while giving focused attention to the most vulnerable, unquote. This is according to the CDB President, Dr. Warren Smith. So the rationale for this $28 million, for the $29 million, let me just go back. To halt economic decline, minimize social hardship, while giving focused attention to the most vulnerable. Mr. Speaker, banque là ko gouvernement qui prend l'argent ça là, qu'a dit raison et qu'a baissé l'argent ça, c'est pour gouvernement empêcher l'économie pays à descendre plus en faillite. Banque là qu'a dit qu'a baissé l'argent ça pour empêcher les affaires sociales viennent plus mauvais. Avec pour gouvernement baille attention pour monde qui en plus difficulté. En anglais on va crier ça most vulnerable. Monde qui plus aisé pour yo ni toi avec difficulté à la vie, most vulnerable. So the test, Mr. Speaker, is whether the government will use the $29 million to focus attention on the most vulnerable. C'est ça moi kamade. So that's why I'm asking the Prime Minister to give us details. What are you going to do with the money? The CDB, Mr. Speaker, once again has indicated that we need to focus on the most vulnerable. Mr. Speaker, this same report further states, and I quote again from the CDB, it is expected that the social impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic will be significant, stemming from an increase in unemployment, loss of income and livelihoods, as well as children, persons with disabilities, indigenous people, and migrants as the most vulnerable groups, unquote. So this $29 million, how much of it will go to children? How much of it will go to people with disabilities? These are the questions. Parce que c'est pour ça yo bay gouvernement la loan, Mr. Speaker. C'est pour ça. We have seen instances where this government has taken loans, the $77 million from the IMF, and the money for the loans, that money has gone to all kinds of things. Transfer in beau séjour, building bridges, all kinds of things. So it's very important, Mr. Speaker, for the government to explain how it's going to benefit, how this money will benefit children, persons living with disabilities, and so on. Mr. Speaker, this is very, very important. As a member of Parliament for Vieux-Fort North, just like many other constituencies, so many people from Vieux-Fort North lost their jobs at the Coconut Bay Hotel and other hotels. So many of them. Will these people, Mr. Speaker, get additional cash assistance based on this $29 million? I spoke to a family, Mr. Speaker, close to Monandrew in Vieux-Fort North. The lady worked at a hotel, the husband worked in the tourism sector. Both of them unemployed. They have children to send to school. What people like that want to find out is whether they will get assistance from all of these monies, these $29 million. The small businesses, Mr. Speaker, to halt economic decline, whether these people will get assistance, all of those small shops, and there are over 175 of them in Vieux-Fort North. The second part of the motion said to bolster economic and social recovery, whether these small business people will get assistance. How will this money bolster economic recovery of these small micro businesses in Vieux-Fort North? What about musicians who work at the hotels? There are many bands in Vieux-Fort North who work at the hotels. Are these people counted in the economic recovery that this loan is supposed to assist with? And again, I go back to the motion. B, bolster economic and social recovery, Mr. Speaker. The farmers who sell to the hotels from Vieux-Fort North, are they going to get assistance? The fishers who today, I was coming up through Trois-Pitons, and I found 3 of them at the back of Suzuki, one Suzuki vehicle, one Toyota Hiace, and another diner truck selling fish this morning in containers. Are these people going to get assistance, Mr. Speaker? All night long, they are selling fish all around St. Lucia. Are they going to get assistance from this $29 million loan? And what about increases in unemployment? How are we going to bolster social recovery, Mr. Speaker, related to the reopening of school, registration of students, social recovery? Will the government assist parents by paying the registration of all secondary school students? What about the primary school students? These are the kinds of things we need to do to assist with this COVID-19 pandemic and the negative impacts. The SSDF, Mr. Speaker, is giving some assistance. But the people from Vieux-Fort North who have been to the office in Vieux-Fort, where the SSDF is doing all of these interviews, many of them are frustrated. They only see a few people, and then, Mr. Speaker, all of these, the interviews, and some of them have said to me this morning that they're only getting uniforms. And they're being told they'll get books, not this year, but next year. And these are the same people who are not working as a result of COVID-19. All I'm saying here, Mr. Speaker, that this motion speaks to bolstering social recovery. And in my constituency, just as every other constituency, the parents who are working and who lost their jobs as a result of COVID-19 need some assistance to help with their social situation. Mr. Speaker, I will continue. In addition to school books, so many people lost their livelihoods and they have to pay for transportation for their children. Can this government tell us today, Mr. Speaker, that because of COVID-19, all children who require transportation for secondary school will get free transportation, Mr. Speaker? We are living in extraordinary times. And they will not specify it, Mr. Speaker, because they do not want us to know exactly what they're doing with the money. And what about the fishers? I go back to them. The nearshore fishers, Mr. Speaker, the pot fish fishers, those who had to stay home for over 2 months, are they getting assistance from this $29 million? Each of these people, Mr. Speaker, would have made over $4,000 between March 26 and now. But because of the lockdowns and because they could not go to sea, Mr. Speaker, they could not make over $4,000. All I'm saying, they had to do it because of the COVID-19 pandemic. I want to know, Mr. Speaker, whether they will get assistance from this $29 million. And you all can gesticulate as you want.
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, what point of order?
Mr. Speaker, the member continues to mislead the House with the information that he is given. The resolution, the motion is clear, Mr. Speaker, that the money is to pay the debts that are owed to CDB for the year from this time until September next year. There's no money coming to the government. This is debt. The member for Castries is got it right when he said it's like taking a debt, using one credit card to pay another credit card. The member for Beaufort North consistently misleads the House by saying that the $29 million can be used for this and can be used for that. Mr. Speaker, that is simple. That is simple to understand. The member needs to withdraw everything that he has said here because nothing is in relation to the bill that is before, the motion that's before the House.
Honorable members, I listened to the Prime Minister presenting the motion, and rightly so, Honorable Member, that's what he said. However, if you read the resolution itself, it seems to give in a little extra whiff to the line. So if you go to the line...
I'll answer you.
No, you won't.
Sorry.
If you go to the line, in order to preserve fiscal space and to be used too, it seems to give that little leeway here. Honorable Member, so it gives this little leeway, Honorable Member, for him to ask if monies are being used locally. Continue, Honorable Member Beaufort now.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm debating the motion that was presented to me. I was a teacher for
Honorable Member, continue.
23 years and I can read.
Honorable Member, make your presentation.
Mr. Speaker, it says, A, to finance essential COVID-19 pandemic-related health expenditure, and B, to bolster economic and social recovery. So what is this member talking about? I don't know what I'm saying. Mr. Speaker, let me continue. The fishers who require assistance, whatever fiscal space you're talking about in this motion. And I went to the CDB, the article by the CDB, to give the rationale for the loans to the Caribbean islands. I went and quoted.
Honorable member.
So, Mr. Speaker, the fishers, I'll continue, Mr. Speaker. The fishers require assistance based on the impact from COVID-19. The vendors from VF North, Mr. Speaker. There are over 200 vendors. Have they received assistance based on the impacts of COVID-19? And we have spoken about the children with disabilities. So, Mr. Speaker, I continue to ask two things. That this government gives a report about their expenditure so far on COVID-19 related activities, and that this money from the CDB and the fiscal space that it allows, the opportunity cost, the fiscal space, the funds that will be generated, Mr. Speaker, be used to assist the people of VF North and the people of St. Lucia who have suffered as a result of the impacts of COVID-19, to assist them, and not for this government to use this as a cover for all other activities within the government, Mr. Speaker. I continue to say in the constituency, when we are clamoring for assistance to our people who have suffered from COVID-19, and as the leader of the opposition has said, the people who are given access to millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of opportunities in contracts are the people who want to contest elections for the United Workers' Party in VF North. That's a fact. Cannot be disputed. That's a fact. And so the Member of Parliament for VF North, in the response to COVID-19, in employment and contracts for the bushing and all of that, it is the people, again I will say, the people who want to run elections for them in VF North are the ones given the access to hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of contracts.
Honorable.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I end my contribution, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.